Voice called out to Ains, interrupting the foolish questions in his heart and the process of ordering Hamsuk to move out. Say, would you be the people who went herb picking with my grandson? The voice was an aged one. When he turned to look, he found an old granny. And who might you be? He said that, but Ains could guess at the answer. If this granny's words were genuine, then there could be only one answer to that question. My name is Lizzie Bearar. I'm Firia's grandmother. Ah. So it really was you? That's right, I'm one of the adventurers who escorted your grandson to Karn village. My name is Maman, and this is Nabe. Lizzie smiled to the bowing Narbril. She's an unbelievably beautiful girl. And what is the name of the creature you're riding? It is the wise king of forest, Hamsuk. This one is Hamsuk. This one is very pleased to meet you. What? This mighty beast is the legendary wise king of the forest. The adventurers around them who heard Lizzie's cry were even more surprised. With shocked looks on their faces, they whispered, "Is that really the monster of legends?" and so on. Indeed. After receiving your grandson's request, we encountered it at our destination, and I managed to tame it. You actually tamed the wise king of the forest. Lizzie was dumbstruck and could do nothing but stare. Then, where is my grandson now? Ah, he went home first with the herbs. We're heading over there now to collect our payment. The old lady breathed a sigh of relief, and then looked at Ains with a strange look in her eyes. Oh, I see then, shall we go together? I'm quite interested in you adventurer types. To Ains, Lizzie's suggestion was like a life preserver to a drowning man. Ah, the pleasure's all mine. The group proceeded through the streets of Irantal, led by Lizzie. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit, then, please come in. Once they reached the storefront, Lizzie came to the front door and took out her keys. Then she looked down and pushed. The door swung open, without any resistance. What's this? This is too careless of him. Lizzie muttered to herself as she entered the shop. Ains and Narbril followed her. Nfiria, Maman Sans here, Lizzie's voice echoed through the shop, but it was silent. It felt as though there was nobody there. What happened? Lizzie was filled with confusion. Ains, on the other hand, replied curtly, trouble. Lizzie heard, but did not understand. Ains paid her no heed, but instead placed his hands on the hilts of his great swords. Narbril figured out what he was up to from that action, and she drew her sword as well. What are you doing? Don't ask, just follow. With that clipped answer, Ains drew his weapons and entered the store. He kicked the door open and kept to the right as he went in. Though this was a stranger's house, completely unfamiliar to him, there was no trace of hesitation in Ains' footsteps. Ains came to a door which led down, and then turned to Lizzie, who had just caught up with him. What is this place for? This is the herb storage room, it leads to the back door. Although she was not sure what was going on, Lizzie sensed that something was wrong and began to worry. However, Ains ignored her and pushed the door open. What he smelled was not the scent of herbs, but a more acrid odor, the stench of blood. The first people he saw were Peter and Luckrut. Dine was a bit further beyond. Ninya was all the way inside the room. All of them were slumped against the walls. Their legs stuck forward and their arms drooped down lifelessly. They seemed to have lost all the blood in their bodies, which was now clotted on the ground so thickly that it looked black. What is this? A shocked Lizzie made to enter with shaky footsteps. Ains put a hand on her shoulder to keep her from moving forward, and quickened his pace to get ahead of her. Just then, the fallen Peter suddenly jerked like a puppet. However, before he could get up, the great sword flashed across him. Peter's head rolled to the ground. With the blade in his other hand, he decapitated Luckrut, who was halfway through standing up. Just as Lizzie managed to process the shock of the tragedy before her, Dine, who was somewhat further inside, had already risen to his feet. The face which raised itself was not a living one. There was no color in it, and its eyes were clouded. There was a hole in its forehead, instantly recognizable as a fatal injury. There was only one reason why a dead man would move again. Because he was undead. Zombie. Just as Lizzie cried out, Dine groaned menacingly and lurched at them. Ains immediately thrust his greatsword at Dine. His throat pierced, Dine's head shuddered, and then he collapsed. Nobody else moved. Amidst the silence, Ains stared at the unmoving Ninya. Infiria. Lizzie finally realized what was going on, and began looking for her grandson. Ains narrowed his eyes at her receding back, and gave Narbril an order. Protect her. My passive skill Undead Blessing isn't giving me any reactions, so there shouldn't be any more undead in the house. But there might be living people inside. Understood. After a quick nod of her head, Narbril broke into a sprint to catch up with Lizzie. Once he made sure that the two of them were gone, Ains looked toward Ninya again. He kneeled slowly before him, and then gently touched the body. Once he was sure that there were none of the usual corpse booby traps found in Yggdrasil, he raised Ninya's face. Of course, he was not unconscious, but dead. He must have been beaten by some sort of blunt object, given how his cheeks were bloated up like pomegranates. If Ains did not know it was Ninya, he might not have recognized the corpse at all. His left eye was crushed, and the vitreous humor had flowed out. It looked like he was crying. The bones of his fingers were completely pulverized. The skin was split open, revealing the red muscle underneath. In some places, there was no muscle at all. Ains pulled open Ninya's clothes, and his eyes went wide in surprise. He closed up the garment, and muttered, so even the body was. Much like the face, the body bore signs of a brutal beating. It was covered in the bruises of internal bleeding, and it would be harder to find a patch of uninjured flesh than the other way around. Ains gently closed Ninya's eyes. This is a little upsetting. The sound of his murmurs faded into the air. Diamond suit, my grandson. Infiria's gone. Lizzie returned, shouting at the top of her voice. Ains had gathered all the corpses into a corner of the room, and calmly replied, I checked their gear. None of them were searched. That being the case, the opposition must have intended to kidnap Infiria. Oh. Come see this. Ains pointed to the letters written in blood under Ninya's corpse. They would not be visible unless someone moved them. This is the sewers? Does it mean he was taken to the sewers? It might be a trap set by the person who did this, and I have no idea how big the sewers are. Searching them might take a long time. What do you think? There's numbers there, 2 to 8. What could that mean? Those are even more suspicious. Although I don't know what those numbers mean, but I can guess that you can divide the city into 8 sections, or it might just be a simple 2-8. Although, did Ninya really have the time to think of all that? Even if Ninya did write it, how much could he have learned from the enemy? This is far too much of a coincidence. Lizzie frowned her already wrinkled face, directing something that approached anger at Ains, who was analyzing the entire situation with unexpected calmness. Then she looked at the 4 corpses on the ground. Who are these people? They were the adventurers your son hired, who went with us. After we parted ways, they should have come to help him unload the herbs. What? Then they're your comrades, aren't they? Ains shook his head. No, they were not. We just happened to be adventuring together. His cold words chilled Lizzie to the bone, and she had no desire to pursue the matter further. Come to think of it, I've been thinking about their corpses, but I'd like your opinion. What do you think about them being turned into zombies? Create undead. That means the enemy has someone who can use at least 3rd-tier magic. I don't know anything else apart from that. I think we need to think of something quickly. Isn't that obvious? What do you mean by that? The enemy could have used mind control or hidden the corpses, but they did not do that at all. They seemed to have done it for fun. Otherwise, they did it because they were absolutely sure they would not be exposed, or that they were completely confident in their ability to escape. I don't know which of them it was. Since they could make zombies, they could have brought the corpses back with them, right? If they wanted to kidnap Infiria, all they would have to do was hide the bodies, which would have bought them enough time to escape. However, the enemy did not do that, which meant that they had other things to do, or because they wanted Lizzie to do something. The latter was easier to deal with. It was the former which was tricky. Nefaria's life and talent were valuable, but they might not be able to use them for long. Would these cruel people who could kill without blinking an eye let him live after using him up? After Lizzie realized the meaning hidden in Ain's words, her gray face turned white. With no idea where he had been taken in this gigantic city, they would need to search the whole of Irantal, which would take far too long. Their only clue was the sewers, but Ains had his doubts about it. The flame of Nefaria's life was ebbing away with each passing moment. Ains calmly turned to the panicked Lizzie and asked, "How about hiring us?" The cold voice continued, "Isn't this something you should hire an adventurer for?" A light came on in Lizzie's eyes as she understood what Ains was getting at. "You are a very lucky woman, Lizzie Berar. At the moment, I am the strongest adventurer in this city, and the only one who can save your grandson's life. If you hire me, I will accept your request. However, the price will be very high, because I am fully aware of how troublesome this task might be." That's right, if it was you, the one who possessed that potion, and with the wise king of the forest, then there's no doubt about your strength. I'll hire you. Is that so? Are you prepared to pay a high price for this? How much will it take to satisfy you? Everything. What? Give me everything you have. Lizzie's eyes widened in shock, and her body trembled violently. Everything you have. When I safely return Firia to you, give me everything you have. You. Backing away in fear, Lizzie muttered, "When you say everything, you don't mean money, or rare potions. I've heard that demons will grant any wish in return for men's souls. Are you a demon? And what if I was? Do you want to save your grandson?" Lizzie did not respond, silently biting her lip. "Then there's only one answer, right? I'll hire you. I'll give you everything I have, so please save my grandson." "Very well, the pact is sealed. Then, let's not waste time. Do you have a map of this city? If you do, lend it to me." Lizzie had her doubts, but she still handed the map to Ains immediately. "Then, we shall find Firia's location next." "Can you do such a thing?" "Only this time. Just this one time, I can." I don't know if the enemy was stupid or... As Ains' voice trailed off halfway, he turned to look at the 4 corpses resting within the room. "Then, I shall begin the search. Go look in the other rooms and see if the people who kidnapped Nfiria left any clues behind. If kidnapping Nfiria was itself a distraction, that would make things troublesome. You're familiar with this home, so you're better suited to this." After thinking up a reason to get Lizzie out of the room, Ains turned to Narbril. "May I ask what you intend?" "Simple. Look, their adventurers' plates are all missing, probably taken by the person who attacked this place. The question now is why they didn't take anything more valuable, but these plates. What do you think?" "My apologies, but I have no idea." That's because, halfway through, a voice spoke in Ains' mind. It was the message spell. Ains Sama. The voice was somewhat high-pitched, and there was something like rustling in the background. "Is that you, Entoma?" "Yes, it is me. It was Entoma Vasilisa Zeta. She was a member of the Pleiades, like Narbril. I have a report to deliver. I'm busy now. I'll contact you again when I'm free." "Understood. Please contact Albedo-sama as soon as possible. The spell ended and Ains continued replying to Narbril, who was looking at him. They were trophies, loot from hunting. Probably a memento for the killer to remember them by. However, that was a fatal mistake. Narbril, use these scrolls. Ains pulled a scroll from his infinite backpack and handed it to Narbril. This is a scroll of locate object. I trust one don't have to tell you what to look for. Understood. With that acknowledgement, Narbril opened the scroll. Just as she was about to activate it, Ains grabbed her hand and coldly rebuked Narbril, "Idiot." Narbril's shoulder shuddered as Ains scolded her. My apologies. When using divination-type magic, you need to prepare yourself thoroughly against the enemy's counter-detection spells before casting it. This is an ironclad rule. When considering that the opposition might use Detect Locate, it's a basic precaution to use false cover, counter-detect, and the like to protect yourself. Also, Ains prepared about 10 more scrolls, and explained the function of each one to Narbril like a teacher. When using magic to collect information, one had to protect oneself. This was basic knowledge. When Ains Olgaun piked, they gathered as much information on the opposition as possible, and then launched an ambush to swiftly decide the matter. Simply put, the battle is over before it begins, as stated by the guild member Punito Mo in the text named Piking for Dummies. Therefore, Ains was now teaching these skills to Narbril, so they would have the advantage if they encountered other players in the future. That's basically it. The fact is, you still need to use skills to improve the effectiveness of your spells and defend yourself, but I don't think we need to prepare so much against our enemy this time. After all, if the opposition was a magic caster who knew more spells to deal with the enemy, they wouldn't have simply cast that level of spells on the corpses. Then, begin, Narbril. A relieved Narbril carefully opened a scroll and recited the name of the spell inscribed upon it. A heatless flame engulfed the scroll, consuming it within seconds and releasing the magic locked within. She did the same with all the other scrolls, and only after sheathing herself in countless protective spells did she finally cast Locate Object. After that, she pointed to a location on the map, there. Ains could not understand the characters, and racked his brains for some clue as to where there was. The graveyard, huh? As I thought, it wasn't the sewers after all. Erantal was also a military base, and the graveyard was massive, almost the largest of its size. The spell pointed to the deepest reaches of the graveyard. I see. Then, use clairvoyance next. Combine it with crystal monitor so I can see as well. Narbril activated the scrolls once more, and the image floating in midair revealed countless human shapes. However, their movements were oddly stiff. In addition, there were many inhuman objects within the image. There was a boy in their midst. He was dressed strangely, but there was no mistake about him. So he's definitely there. And the metal plates should be nearby, a big mass of undead? There was a group of undead around Nfiria. They were all low-tier undead, but they were present in surprising numbers. What do you plan to do? Teleport in and wipe them all out at once? Or perhaps use flight magic to attack them from above? Don't be silly. Wouldn't either of those methods mean that the problem gets solved without anyone knowing about it? Seeing that Narbril had no idea of what he was talking about, Ains continued his explanation. Whoever created all these undead must have done so in preparation for something of earth-shaking proportions. Therefore, if we save Nfiria and deal with that matter at the same time, it will greatly boost our reputations. If we do this on the quiet, we will only receive Lizzie's payment, and we won't be able to gain much fame from it. That said, if they did not take care of the situation quickly, there was a high chance that Nfiria might die. Even Ains could not summon this many undead and control them, so there must have been some sort of trick at work here. Nfiria's life might well be an important part of that trick. That said, he wanted to know the secret of that trick, even if it cost Nfiria's life. The most important thing to Ains was how to strengthen the Great Tomb of Nazarick. If he could do so by sacrificing Nfiria, then he would gladly pay that price. I'd like to collect more information, but our preparations and time won't allow it, Ains muttered as he approached the door. After opening it, he shouted, Lizzie. We're ready. We're heading to the graveyard now. What about the sewers? Lizzie's voice came from far away, accompanied by the patta-patta of her running footsteps. The sewer is just a red herring which the author of this tragedy left for us. They're actually in the graveyard, together with an army of undead. There's easily thousands of them there. What? Of course it was an estimate. How could he have counted all of them? No need to be shocked. We intend to cut a path through them. The problem is that we can't guarantee that undead army won't escape from the graveyard. You need to tell as many people as possible to hold the undead back if they see them spilling out. There's no proof, but I'm sure that a lot of people will be willing to listen to a big name like you. If the undead ran wild and there was nobody stopping them, that would be troublesome, no? Ain's face twisted under his helmet. If I don't make a grand spectacle of this, it'll be a pain. The more I heat this up, the more fame I'll earn when I solve the problem. That's why I'm doing this, after all. That's all I have to say. Time is tight, so I'll be heading over right now. Do you have a way to break through that army of the dead? Ains looked quietly at Lizzie, and then pointed to the great swords on his back. Don't you see it right here? Part 3. There was a place which occupied roughly a quarter of Erantal's outer ring, which was also most of the western quadrant. It was Erantal's communal cemetery. While other cities had their own graveyards, none of them were as big as this one. This was in order to suppress the spawning of the undead. Although many things were unclear about the spontaneous genesis of the undead, the basic idea was that vile creatures frequently spawned from the places where the living came to an end. Of these, people who died sudden, violent deaths, and the dead who were not properly revered had the highest chance of coming back to unlife. Therefore, battlefields and ruins tended to be infested by the undead. Since Erantal was very close to the Empire and consequently its battlefields, it required a huge graveyard, a place where remains could receive the proper veneration. In this aspect, the neighboring country, the Empire, also adhered to their common agreement to respect the dead. Though they slaughtered each other, they both saw the undead that attacked the living as their common enemy. In addition, there was another problem with the undead. If left unattended, the undead spawned more powerful undead. This was why the city guards and adventurers patrolled the graveyards day and night to exterminate the weaker undead as soon as possible. A wall surrounded the graveyard. This wall was the boundary between the living and dead. While it was only 4 meters tall, and could not compare to the city walls, it was wide enough for people to walk on top of it. The large doors set into its side were sturdy, and could not be easily breached. All this was in order to ward against the undead that spawned in the graveyard. There were staircases to the left and right of the doors, and watchtowers along the length of the wall. The guards took turns observing the graveyard below them as they yawned from the watchtowers, in shifts of 5 men at a time. The graveyard was lined with sconces enchanted with continual light spells, so there was ample illumination despite it being nighttime. Still, there were many shadowy places, and visibility was even worse in those places blocked by tombstones. A spear-wielding guard absent-mindedly looked out to the graveyard, and said to his yawning colleague, "Tonight's quite peaceful too." "Yup, there were only 5 skeletons earlier, right? That seems a lot less compared to the past." Could it be the souls of the dead were called back by the 4 gods? That would be pretty lucky for us if it were true. The other guards were drawn in by the topic, and began speaking up. "Well,